When we find the gospel biographies of Jesus being written is really at the height of ancient biographical writing as a genre. This is when we get ancient individuals like Plutarch or Suetonius or Tacitus and so on, writing biographies of important figures in their day. So if we were to hop in our time machine and go back in our timeline, the earliest life story accounts we see being written in detail are what we call proto-biography. These start to pop up about half a millennium behind the Gospels. But at this point, what would have been considered biographical would be the equivalent of a funeral eulogy. It might talk about the influence of the person as a soldier or as a leader, but it really just amounted to nice things they said about individuals. This would include writers like Thucydides, Pericles, and Aristophanes. But a few hundred years after we find the Gospels being written, we find what we call hagiography. Remember, hagio comes from the Greek word meaning holy, and graphe means writing. And these stories tended to include a great deal of accepted embellishment. It was common practice at this time to exaggerate a little bit, potentially more than normal, in order to really capitalize on a saint or a politician you were trying to make an account of. And that was accepted within the grounds of the writing itself. However, between these 2 points of proto-biographical material and hagiographical material is what we find within the classical world, which is considered the crown of ancient biographical sources. It's during this time that we actually find standards being laid out by individuals like Lucian, who writes a document titled How to Write History, and he stresses things like impartiality, detachment, and rigorous devotion to truth that characterizes an individual and ideal history. So if we look at something like the Gospel of Luke, in the preface to the Gospel of Luke, Luke actually exemplifies what Lucian is talking about when we see him saying that he's undertaking the task of writing an account, and to do so, he's interviewing eyewitnesses and he's carefully investigating everything from the beginning. Or another example in the New Testament would be John. In his first letter, he starts the letter by saying that what he's testifying to is that which was from the beginning, which they heard, which they saw, which they touched. These are the words of people who, while they might not have had firsthand knowledge of the standards laid out by individuals like Lucian, they're certainly aware that what you say requires a level of authenticity and truthfulness, that it can be measured and it can be held in terms of its historical quality. And the Gospels are being written in this exact time window where the apex of standards for biography intersected with a conscientious notion of historiography. You know, Alexander the Great died in 323 BC. The earliest material we have for Alexander's life and exploits come from Arrian, who's writing those things about 450 years after Alexander actually lived. The Gospels are not just coming during a time when biography and historiography are at their apex, but they're even set in their own category because they're being written contemporaneous to the individuals they're chronicling. The Gospels are contemporary biography because they're writing about Jesus in a time when there's a living memory of him, when people who would have actually encountered Jesus during his teaching, who could have been in the crowd during the feeding of the 5,000, who might have been at the wedding at Cana when he was having his public debates with the Pharisees and Sadducees, people would have seen those things. And so the gospel authors would have known that if they're writing these things down, there would have been people who were reading or maybe even hearing the stories orally from their gospels that could verify or fact check those details. This is unusual in the realm of ancient historical biography. A very small minority of ancient biographies were being written when eyewitnesses to those people and events were actually still alive. And what this leaves us with is an incredible level of confidence that what we call the Gospels, those early biographies of Jesus' life, are incredibly accurate.